Agency for Hyderabad Science and Cluster, Science and Technology Cluster. Thank you, madam. Over to you, madam. Please continue the session, ma'am.
Thank you, doctor, for the kind introduction.
And one more thing I forgot yesterday also. I am also a biomedical engineer.
Oh, that's wonderful to know.
Right. I am very much.
Is it?
Yes, madam.
That's really nice to meet you.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank
we should
you.
connect offline sometime.
Yes, yes, definitely. Thank you so much, madam. Please.
So let me just share my screen. Let me know if you can see the screen.
Yes, madam.
Can you see it?
No, madam. Blank screen is there.
Okay. How about now?
Yes, madam.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Padma, for the kind introduction. And it's always a pleasure to meet fellow biomedical engineers and who are passionate about entrepreneurship and innovation. So indeed, it's a pleasure to be here again today to be able to address the faculty who are interested and who wants to take up the role of being entrepreneurial mindsets in wherever you are placed. So moving on, I hope this is not the condition today as well. When I ask you to switch on your cameras, your mouths are not full with food or you're sleeping. I know it's a tough time. It's even a lunch break for us, but I hope and I try my best to keep this as interesting as possible. Again, I'll follow the same storyline. We love movies, and let's listen to the movie again. It's a continuation movie, and we live in a world where sequels, prequels are more popular. We want to know what happened and what will happen. And so let's continue the same story of entrepreneurship, where our lead actors and supporting actors are taking part. We know the lead actors need the supporting actors for their success. So let's do a quick recap of what we have heard so far. Give me a second, sorry. Let me switch on my timer so that I don't overshoot. Thank you. So as I said, the lead actors in this entire movie is the entrepreneurs, the most bubbling, energetic, risk-taking people who are willing to do calculated risk and face the uncertainties in the world to bring economic and value and social good. So these are the lead actors who write a different story in the world, who change the course of direction in the business world. So these mini-me's who find an opportunity and translate into business, work on their product development, and also understand how the market is for such a product or a need. And when they work together with their product and market in mind, they try to address a social problem in the society, or they bring in economic value to the society, or even both. So we knew that when they are in this journey of, in the process of entrepreneurship, they need several actors, several resources, several institutes, organizations who are interconnected and work together as a network to help them. And we said that these are the actors, and they are called as the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So the entrepreneurs need a very strong entrepreneurial ecosystem to flourish. And we identified and we spoke about many stakeholders who work individually or in a concerted way, collaboratively, and bring in different resources to the table. And as famously said by Eisenberg's 6 pillars of entrepreneurial ecosystem, these ecosystem stakeholders either cater to the policy, finance, culture, support, human capital, or markets pillar in building up the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And we also heard that yesterday, if these 6 pillars come together and the various players act together, then the lead actors, the entrepreneurs, can be successful and avoid failure. So for the success of the startups, it's very essential that all the 6 pillars are very strong and all the 6 pillars are working collaboratively in the same direction with the same motive of making the entrepreneurial journey successful. But however, at times these journeys, or most of the times, in fact, literature says that almost 90% of the startups fail. And when these startups were analyzed and the reason was categorized into few subdivisions, the top reason turned out to be they run out of cash or they fail to raise new capital. So I would like to remind you, or I would like to take you to note these two things. There are 2 points for this failure. One, they ran out of cash, which kind of shows that they were not able to manage their cash efficiently. It's not that they didn't have access to cash, but it was their inability to manage the cash properly. So the startup founders or the startup team was not able to utilize the cash that was given to them in the right way. The second one is fail to raise new capital. This is unavailability or inaccess to the new capital for them to bring in more cash to the startup or the company. So let me jump to the topic for today, which is addressing the second pillar in the Eisenberg's model of entrepreneurial ecosystem, which is finance. So financial capital is one of the key requirements for any startup to even come to existence. Without financial capital, maybe the founder can work, but the founding team may not. Maybe the founder's passion can take him forward, but to build it, to make it materialize, to make it an implementation level, there is a requirement for cash. So let me bring in, there is a need for the founder of the startup to understand the AAA for his startup. It's not just about raising money, but there are 3 things that he has to understand, which is awareness of the funding, access to those funding, and ability to manage those funding. So not just manage the funding, but also ability to raise the funding. AAA rating is something which I passionately call for the startup founders to know. So for them to be aware of the kind of funding, let me repeat it, access to the funding and ability to get the funding and manage the funding. And a quick tidbit, AAA rating is actually a credit rating, which means that an entity or an instrument which gets a AAA rating has exceptional credit quality and it's not gonna default. So in some ways, I tell the startups they should have this AAA rating to make sure that their investors are happy to lend money to them or happy to put in their hard-earned money to them. So let's go ahead with awareness. Before awareness, before even going into the market and searching for funds for their startup, the startup first needs to understand, do I need to raise money? Is there a necessity for me to raise money? There are several cases where the startup doesn't have to need money. Maybe in the mature stage, when the startup already has cash inflows and revenue coming, they don't have to raise money. And there is another caveat with the startup founders have to know that not all startups ideas can be funded. There are many ideas which will not get funded irrespective of how much efforts the startup and the team makes. So the first question that the startup founder has to ask himself or herself is, do I really have to raise money? And then if he or she answers the question, yes, I have to raise money, then the person needs to understand what is the purpose for which the startup needs the money for. Does the startup need the money for conducting research, basic research to understand about the technology? Does it need money for product prototyping or product development? Does it need money for setting up the manufacturing facility or just to carry the day-to-day operations, or for building up the team or for scaling up to meet the orders? And these are questions which come at different stages of the startup journey. These are not questions which come all at the same time, but they come at different phases of the journey in which the startup is. And at the same time, when the startup understands what is the purpose for the startup to raise money, they need to understand that each phase, each requirement is met by a different kind of an investor. Not all investors come at the same phase. So let me quickly move to show you what are the stages and the types of funding available. As I said, the journey of startups is very cumbersome. Initially, there is the y-axis represents growth, which is revenue or sales, and the x-axis represents the financial stage. So if you see the journey of the startup in this curve, it begins with having a negative cash flow or negative sales, and it starts at the time when they roll out their product into the market. And when I say product, it involves both software, hardware, and combination of both. So when the product comes into the market, it goes up, it starts the sales cycle, and at some point over the time where it moves from being a early stage startup to a late stage startup and comes into IPO phase. And in each stage, if you notice, there are different stakeholders. So there are research grants, and these are grants that are available for research and commercialization of ideas. Then there are grants from the government or cities, states, or any foundations like USAID, Bill and Melinda Gates, and others. And then, of course, this is called the love fund, which comes from the entrepreneur himself for following his passion, or the family and friends, or the fools whom he can convince. So there's always the 3 F's that the startup entrepreneur needs to have with him: who believe in his passion, who believe in his idea, who know that the future is good with the money that they can entrust him with. Following on, there are other institutional funding sources. For instance, there are business angels, venture capitalists, and then you have banks which give debt and microfinance, which are also debt forms of funding. And then in the end, when there is an exit, the startup can be exited either via a merger or a merger with a big entity, or getting acquired by a bigger entity, or by initial public offering, going an IPO where his shares are available for public to buy. So these are certain ways in which the startup will be able to raise or get funds back to the investors who invest in the previous early stages. And even in the early stage and during the expansion and late stages, the money has different nomenclatures. They come in as seed fund. Then there is a Series A, Series B, Series C, which is the first round, second round, third round. And then there is mezzanine rounds. So at these rounds as well, different kinds of entities fund differently. So with this understanding that there are different stages in the startup journey and there are different types of funding available for the startup journey, let me just introduce you the funding sources that are there. So to begin with, as seen in the previous graph, the first and foremost type is the bootstrapping. Bootstrapping essentially means you are putting your own financial resources, either getting it from your own savings or from your family and friends, or from individuals who can be received from the crowdsourcing platforms. So there are several crowd funding platforms in India, and each one of them each one of the funding type I'll explain in detail moving on. And then there are other startup platforms like incubators, accelerators, and there are several grants that are also given by the government through the incubators and accelerators, and or directly from their own grant schemes, which also will be taken care in the later stages. Then there are equity sources, which is given by the angel investors, venture capitalists, and private equity. Again, angel investors come in at an early stage, venture capitalists come in during the expansion and later stage. Private equity is more towards the later stages and during IPO. By the time the startup reaches a private equity stage, they are pretty much mature and they have their own cash flows coming in. Ideally, that would be the necessary case. However, there are other debt sources as well. For instance, banks which give debts, whether it's being a public bank or a private bank, there are several entities who are at this point of time willing to fund startups. But at the same time, let me put a caveat here. Debt sources from banks is not an easy funding to get. There is either a requirement for a collateral or a requirement for strong credit history with the banks. And then there are commercial institutes which are willing to fund venture debts more as a loan for the startup to have, which needs to be repaid at a later stage. As I said, each investor comes in at a different phase. So bootstrapping, which is putting your own investment primarily because of the quantum of money needed, which is usually less amount, comes in during the inception and seed stage. And this is partly because at this point in time, many people do not fund ideas. In fact, none of them fund ideas. Ideas are not fundable. It's only when they have been started to be implemented that the ideas or the solutions get funded. So at least there is a necessity to have a minimum viable prototype, a user feedback or research done to understand the market. Until that stage, so we have noticed that there is a necessity for bootstrapping. Very rarely ideas or startups get funded at a very early stage when it's still in ideation phase. It's highly unlikely and it's most probably bootstrapped until a certain level of stage. After that, accelerators and incubators who act as disbursers of grants also give seed amount. And this amount typically ranges around 5 to 50 lakhs. Max, under certain schemes, you get 1 crore to 2 crores. And this grant amount is either given as a grant without any expectation of equity or any debt. But there are certain grants which comes in with an equity component or a debt-linked instrument. Then we have angel investors who come in after the seed stage or seed and the early stage. These investors give in a quantum of amount around 20 lakhs to 10 crores, and they expect a return from the startup in a span of, their money is still more patient capital. They look for a higher returns, which is if they have given 1 lakh, they expect a 15 lakhs return. But they give it for a longer period of time, and also their risk appetite is bigger than the risk appetite of the next investor, which is venture capital. Angel investors are still ready to talk with startups which have partial proof of concept validated or minimum viable product developed, and still in product development stage. However, it's highly possible that angel investors also want their risk to be mitigated by having at least couple of user validations done, either as a paid validation or as a pro bono validations from the users done. Venture capital, the next set of venture investors, they come in at a later stage during the expansion or during post-validated stage. They give in amounts as big as 2 crores to 25 crores or larger quantum of money. But their expectation is that the startup, since it has a validated product now, maybe with initial customer traction, with couple of customers, they need 10x to 20x returns within a span of 5 years. So they look for very short runway. They don't want to put in their money for a longer period of time. So, and then, as I said, by the time the private equity investors come in, the startup is in a stage where it's growing, generating its own revenue, has its own sales cycle, and all they need is for their further expansion and for their operational needs and for their inventory management and order placements. So the quantum of money here is around 25 crores and plus. Again, being mindful, these numbers are very indicative, depends on case-to-case basis and also the ecosystem that you come in. Different cities, geographies have different brackets of investment quantum, and it also varies on the sector to sector as well. Different industries, for instance, life sciences, biotechnology need huge capital investment, and they do not fall in this bracket. And the government has also enabled via grants route where where these difficult industries, which are highly intensive on the funding needs, are addressed through government funding. So let me take component by component on the various types of funding. As I said, bootstrapping is basically your own investment. And here, along with you, it could be investment from your friends and family. Yet another way is crowdfunding. So there are several platforms in India for startups which enable the startups to get money pooled from different passionate individuals who are willing to invest in ideas and early stage startups. For instance, there is Kickstarter funding source. I'll just add a disclaimer here. We have never used any crowdfunding sources. So I do not know the authenticity of these crowdfunding sources, but I know startups which have benefited from these crowdfunding sources. So especially if you are from an IT industry or an IT background, you would have used several crowdfunding platforms like this, even for sourcing codes like GitHub and others, including electronics industry. They also work a lot on these collaborative platforms. So these crowdfunding platforms where a startup or the founder can add his idea and request for people who are interested to fund him or her. So the second type of funding that's available is via incubators or accelerators, the grant amount. So there are several, as I said yesterday, there are several startup platforms which are built by academic institutes, corporates, by research institutes, by government through DST, DBT, AIC, BIRAC, the Bionest incubators, who act as the disbursers of funding. So one good venue for you to know or understand the various funding that's available as grants or even angel funding or any other scheme related funding is the funding database that has been curated by Venture Center. Venture Center is an incubator based out of Pune in India, and it's one of the largest science business incubator. It's a non-profit technology business incubator. And from 2019, they have started 2009. They have started building this database of various grants that are available for startups to use. So the funding database has a lot list of the various grants. Along with that, couple of private schemes that are available for the startups to benefit from. And the funding database is predominantly structured this way. So they show the various stages that are involved in the startup journey. So if you see, the stages starts from idea or opportunity identification, then proof of concept, prototype development, validations and trials and approvals, then commercial production, market entry. And for each stage, they have certain funds and they have bucketed these funds under these stage, which can be accessible by a one click. And it will lead you to a database where all the funds have been documented. Then there are grants from entities like Startup India. Startup India has introduced a Startup India Seed Fund scheme, according to which the startups which are in the proof of concept, prototype stage, product trials, market entry, and commercialization can benefit. However, Startup India Seed Fund is not given directly to the startups. It is through the incubators that the startups receive the fund. So the details of this are well documented in the portal. The grant comes in, the grant is up to 20 lakhs, but beyond, and that is for the early ideation stage. However, after the proof of concept development, after the product prototyping, if the startup wants to take advantage of the debt link instrument, there is debt linked instrument money as well available, which is which many incubators disperse it, and the quantum of amount is around 50 lakhs. So even at Rich, we are part of the Startup India Seed Fund scheme, and we are open for startups that are looking for 50 lakhs debt link instrument category. So startups which wants to, which are in the stage of market entry, commercialization, scaling up, or which are looking for validation studies, can and fit into these three sectors: food and agriculture, life sciences, and sustainability, can apply for our scheme as well. It's a rolling application, so they can reach out to us if they want, if they are looking for this amount. Apart from this, one more grant grant scheme is the Nidhi Prayas scheme. Under the Nidhi, which is held by DST department, there are several grants, and these are grants which are fun for startups in the idea, prototype, or product stage. They help startups to build their prototype and product, and the quantum of amount is up to 10 lakhs. Again, these funds are not given directly to the startup, they are given through the incubator. So there are several Prayas centers which are established across India, and these centers are the are the entities which call for applications. So if you see, there are several incubators which are with their open call and which are looking for startups to apply. Then there is yet another entity called BIRAC under DBT, Department of Biotechnology. Under BIRAC, there are several startup funds. The most impactful, which is for the early stage startups, is the BIG, Biotech Ignition Grant. However, BIRAC doesn't focus on all the sectors. The focus areas for BIRAC is biotechnology, food and agriculture, and aquaculture, pharmaceutical, biomaterials, medical devices. They are predominantly only in those sectors. And after BIG, they also support the startups which are in the early stage beyond proof of concept for the validation studies using SBIRI grant, SBIRI. Then they also have a startup grant called the PACE and BIPP. Both these grants are for startups which are in a later stage for entering into the market. So biotech startups or life sciences startups which have long periods for the product development, almost like 3 to 4 years or more, have benefited a lot from the BIRAC grants. Moving on to the next type of funding, which is the equity sources. Equity sources come in the form of angel investors or venture capitals. Angel investors are those folks which come in early with a higher risk appetite. And one way to find out who are the angels is using databases. So we do have databases like Vinos, who capture the various individual investors who are willing to invest in the startups. Then you also have places where they list the top angel investors in the Indian startup ecosystem. Then you have angel investor networks, for instance, Indian Angel Network, Lead Angels, Hyderabad Angels. Then you have city-specific angel networks like Chennai Angels, Mumbai Angels, Calcutta Angels, Chandigarh Angels, and so on. All these angel networks is basically a group of high net worth individuals who have disposable amount for investing in the startups. Again, each angel network may or may not fund all the sectors. They will be having certain specific sectors based on the fund that they are looking into. Then moving on, the next equity venture investor is the VC. VC investors can also be identified or known through VC investors database. For instance, Airtable Universe is one of the databases which captures all the VC funds and that are available, including Traction. Traction also highlights all the various VC investors, VC funds that are available for the startups to explore. Also, as I said, the same thing logic holds for them as well. They do not fund all the sectors. They do not fund all the startups in the early stage. They look for a later stage and a less riskier ventures with high returns. Some of the top VC funds are mentioned here. This is just a glimpse of the VC funds that are available. There are many VC funds which are available in India, and they all have their specific sectors which they focus on. And based on the requirement of the startup needs to understand which VC fund or which kind of investor that they have to approach to. And the last type of funding is the debt sources, which is via banks and commercial institutions. Banks offer a lot of funds in terms of loans. And as I said before, these loans are not easy to get. These loans have to be either the founder or the co-founder has to have a very good credit history and should guarantee collateral and other necessary requirements as per the bank requirements. So the bank loan, this is one of the websites which I thought was showing all the various bank loans that are available for startups in the Indian context. And for instance, there are certain banks, for example, SBI does a startup specific program just to fund and be of support to startups. And then there are also bank loans such as in other banks like Bank of Baroda, and also private banks like HSBC, ICICI, HDFC also fund, give debt to startups. And some of the banks also work along with the incubators. For instance, HDFC works along with the incubators to diverse their CSR funds as well. And let me add on, these are just few of the funding sources example that I have covered under each type of funds. There are many more fund sources that are available under each broad heading. For instance, there are thousands of VC firms, there are thousands of angel investors, and hundreds of angel investor networks. So awareness is something which the startup has to have to know that there are these required, these different funding options. These different funding types come in at a different stage. So I need to know for what requirement I have to go to which investor. You pick the right investor, you pick the right stage, and you pick the right purpose for which you are reaching out to the right investor. Getting the fund is not difficult. However, it's the difficulty, or it's misleading startup to know that all the investors come in at any stage of their journey. No, at every stage, at every particular phase, different investors come in, and you need to approach to the right investor. So moving on, let me address the second A, which is the access. Now that I have known there are so many funding sources and there are so many funding sources with different expectations, different requirements, and different quantum of money, how would I know as a startup which investor to go, and how will I have access to the investor? It's only by networking and being connected with the right ecosystem. That is where the entrepreneurial ecosystem comes into play. That is where the supporting actors, the incubators, the clusters, the academic institutions, the research institutions, the incubators based out of in these spaces, the mentors, the advisors come into play. It is, and also the industry associations who are part of this rich network of high net worth individuals come into play. The startups need to be allowed to expose to themselves to network in these arenas so that they can pitch to the investors. And there are several events that keep happening across the year for different sectors where the investors and industry players come in. The startup needs to have its visibility and the presence in these events, presence in these various ecosystem activities where they can meet the investors, where they can pitch their idea to the investors. So it is the dynamism, or it is the personality that a founder has that makes him being visible to the investor network. A lot of times the founder is responsible for the cash that he can bring into the system, to the startup. And there are many more players who can help you enable to connect with these various funding sources, either to the angel networks or to the VC capitals. So moving on, now that you have understood, you are aware of the various funding sources and when they come in, now you know how to access it. The final A is the ability of the startups to access the fund and also manage the fund. So the startup have usually assessed on these 4 parameters. The idea has to be feasible, it has to be scalable, it has to be unique, and it should be an opportunity or a need that is addressing the market. If your idea falls flat in any one of them, if it's not feasible technologically, it doesn't have the scaling effect that it brings in multiple times return to the investor, or it doesn't address any market need or market problem, then the idea will not take off. Then the future, the plan that, before future, the idea is not everything. The startup also need to have a business. It should ensure that the core team that is working for the startup is of very high quality. They have the potential to take the startup to the next stage where they can assure the rate of return which each investor is expecting. So if the angels need a 15x to 20x, the startup team should be in a position to convince the angels that with our idea, with our team, the execution capabilities, we will be able to give you that return in this many years. So that is something which a core team brings in. So it's necessary that the startup has to have multiple team members. We have seen that increasingly angels and VCs do not come in when the startup has only one founder. They expect at least the startup to have 2 or 3 founders, along with a strong founding team with subject matter expertise, along with business strategy expertise. So both technology and business has to be addressed through the team that they have. They should have a robust business model, their entry into market, their entry into getting the credit from their vendors, customers. Their cash flow management has to be understood properly. And the team needs to convince the investors that they understand the revenue model, they understand the pricing and costs that are in the business. This has to be really put forth, and all this information about the idea, the business, comes in their presentation deck or the pitch deck, which is known as. And at times, the startup might get only email e-connect with the investors and the angel investors or the VCs. And therefore, their pitch deck has to be really crisp, and it has to be of high quality to grab attention for the next conversation with the investors. And moving after the pitch deck, the startups should have the capability to pitch crisply their idea and the pitch deck. The startups at times are given only 3 to 5 minutes or even lesser time with the investors to showcase their idea, to showcase their business. And this time, the startup has to ensure they make the influential pitch for the investors to attract them and be willing to engage in a longer investment discussions. And for that, one of the key things that they have to showcase is also the future for their business. They should have strategic plan of expansion, of scale up, of usage of funds, and also an exit strategy. They should show that they will not be a startup which will grow 10x, 15x, 20x over the span of next 5 to 10 years. They should be able to project those kind of revenues and those kind of returns for the investors. And that's exactly the return of ROI, which is the return of investment. The investor needs to be convinced of that the startup will be able to justify the investment that they put in. So all this depends on the ability of the startup. If all this depends on the ability of the startup, then can the entrepreneurial ecosystem do anything to enhance the startup in building it? Yes, of course. Through our methodologies and mentorship, we can help the startup in building these robust business plans, robust pitch decks and pitching. We can help the startups to understand what are the components that needs to be in the pitch deck. We can help the startups in understanding the art of storytelling, how to pitch it in front of investors at different stages of life, of the startup journey life. If they have to pitch it at an early stage, what is the story that need to tell? If they have to pitch it at a later stage, what is the story that can be told? And all this comes again by connecting to the entrepreneurial ecosystem, connecting to good mentors, connecting to good incubators who can bring in these. Mentorship is also very important for the startups. They need to be connected to a good mentor who can guide them in the right direction, who can show them the gaps that that the startup has. Apart from that, a quick tip or advice that you can always share to the startup is having a good chartered accountant. A good CA helps the startup in understanding cash flow managements. A good CA will help them to understand when to take which kind of fund and also to manage those startups. So it's always important that a startup is connected to a good CA who can bring in financial due diligence, compliance due diligence into the company. These are certain statutory rules which the startup has to ensure or follow these hygienic factors from the time they have started their journey. It goes into long way because every investor, before he invests, that's a lot of due diligence. That is background checking of the startup, where they try and see how the startups have been maintaining their books, financial books, whether they have been filing their taxes, whether they have been filing their GST returns. And all these basic financial compliances needs to be met from the day one when the startup has been incorporated. And this good practice needs to be encouraged and needs to be asked them to be followed from day one, so that the investors come in at a different stages of the startup journey will not have red flags for the startup. In spite of all these checks and dues, there are several investments, several stories that we hear where this due diligence or has been neglected or where has not been followed by startups. So that's it from my side for today. But before I end, I just wanted to quickly recap what I have been sharing from the last 2 days. As I said, this is a movie on entrepreneurship. And in this movie, our lead actors are definitely the entrepreneurs, and our supporting actors are the entrepreneurial ecosystem that helps these lead actors to succeed. And entrepreneurship is definitely the process of identifying and evaluating opportunities so that they can bring economic value and social value to the society. It is just the organization and management of various activities for addressing problem in the society and making a business which is economically and socially valuable. Entrepreneurial ecosystem is an interconnected network of individuals, resources, organizations, institutions, policies, which work together to support the entrepreneurship journey in a specific region or an industry. These includes both tangible and intangible elements like money, like support, like culture, resources, and others. And that's where the Eisenberg's model of entrepreneurial ecosystem came into play. We saw that the 6 pillars are very important for them to progress together to build a successful entrepreneurial ecosystem. So the policy, finance, culture, support, human capital, and markets need to work together for a high quality entrepreneurial ecosystem. And today we focused on financial capital, the various types of funding that are available, and the various stages at which they are available for a startup. And I encourage the startups or the startups that you will be advising or you are part of to have this AAA rating all the time. They let them be aware of the various sources that are available for funding. How can they access it, and help them, encourage them to have the ability to access it and manage it well. The ability to access and manage solely depends on the startup, and hence the founders and the founding team is very necessary and integral part of a good startup. So with that, I hope that the startups that you will be engaging with will find manifold success. You yourself, if you are part of any startup and you are building an entrepreneurial ecosystem, will find humongous success in the startups that you lead. And that's it from my end. Thank you. Keep learning and keep practicing.
Thank you so much, madam, for your wonderful session, giving a lot of insights into how the funding can flow and what are the feasibilities and opportunities where we can pitch in so that we can able to guide our students in a better way. Thank you so much, madam. From the participants, any questions to madam to get clarified? Requesting participants.
Hello, madam.
Yes, sir.
I have a small doubt, madam.
Yeah.
Students, they are interested in creating a startup, but they may not be confident in explaining them to the fund providing agencies. Are you giving any training program to the students such that they are able to get confidence in explaining their concept so that they get good amount of fund?
Okay, thank you for the question, sir. Not at Rich at this point of time, but we do understand that there is a lot of requirement for them to articulate. So we don't do anything for the startups at this point of time, but we do, I mean, for students at this point of time, but we do it for startups. So we do have startups which come in the incubation and acceleration phase. So when they are in that stage, we help them with the funding opportunities phase, where we help them with one session, which is called Art of Storytelling. So we help them to understand what are the key factors that the investors look into, and that needs to be highlighted during your pitching time. So yes, we do help startups, but not students at this point of time.
I
But
wish you
we will be happy to help if you find a critical mass of students, say 20 to 30 students who are willing to understand, we'll be able to help it. It's just that at this point of time, we never got any requests for that.
Or otherwise, if any student approaches us, can we send them to you? So
Yeah,
that,
yeah, definitely. We can help them. It's just that, yeah, we can.
And you can also conduct some awareness programs to the first year students at least even.
Okay. Before TASK used to do it, TASK, which is Telangana Academy of Skills and Knowledge, used to do it through TEP program, where they used to have communications module as well under their technology entrepreneurship program. However, because of changes, that program is not there, and it used to be done through via ISB, Indian School of Business, but now they don't have it. We are open to consider it. We just need a critical buy-in from the participants, because a lot of times now the whole idea is either they want it online or in person. We are not very clear of the audience, but happy to work with you if you have a group of people, group of students willing to learn. We will be happy to engage with resource persons and conduct it.
And another question, you told that there are startups in economy field.
In which field? Sorry, sir.
Economies. That means there's IT services.
Yeah, IT services. Okay.
They do some ITR filing like this. Some small group of people join together and put a company and they serve people.
Okay.
Are there any other examples, those who have started like this in your
okay. Are you saying IT services or IT income tax?
Income tax.
Income tax. Okay.
I mean,
so yeah, got it. So when you say income tax services, these are like the consultants, CAs or anybody, account consultants, who help startups or companies to understand their finances and give them reports like UC, utilization certificates, or due diligence reports, or any kind of checklist that they need. There are a lot of service providers that we engage with at T-Hub and at Rich as well, who provide these services for our startups. So normally a couple of freelance CAs come together, they establish their own brands and they do it. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you for your wonderful session.
Thank you.
From the participants, any more questions? Participants. Right. Okay. Thank you so much, madam, for giving us a valuable opportunity for us to have a discussion in this forum like FDP. We are very thankful to you from Gokaraja Rangaraja Engineering College.
Thank you. It was my pleasure as well to be able to interact, and we at Rich are open for your any requirement. Let us know. You have our coordinates as well, and others as well. If you need our support, we are always there for you. We are just email away. We'll reach out to you.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, madam.
Before I leave, I have one request. My communications manager has asked me to take a couple of pictures. If a couple of you can switch on the video, that will be great.
Please, all of you, switch on your videos.
Yeah, just a couple of you at least, because I've been told by my manager, communications manager, that I need to take at least a couple of pictures. We'll post it in the LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you.
Questions explain.
దీని గురించి ఎలాబరేట్ చేస్తా ఇమేజ్ చిన్నగా ఉంది.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much to all the participants. We will join by 2:20 without any delay. Thank you, all of you.